Singing. When Paul went to Corinth in 1 Corinthians, the second chapter, beginning with the first verse, he told the Corinthians these words. And these words have really sort of been a theme of my ministry for ever since I started. I just have always loved these words of the Apostle Paul, and they always mean so much to me. And I want to leave those words with you today. Paul's feeling to the church at Corinth, and this is my feelings to you as a pastor to this congregation. Paul writes these words in 1 Corinthians 2:1. He begins by saying, "And when I came to you, brethren, I did not come to you with superiority of speech or of wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God. For I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my preaching and my message were not in persuasive words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith would not rest on the wisdom of men, but on the power of God." Aren't those wonderful words? Wish I'd have written them instead of having to memorize them. I wish I'd have written them, but tremendous words. And I believe that. I've really believed that in my ministry. Paul had a priority there. When I came to you, brethren, I did not come with spirit of speech or wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God. For I determined to know nothing among you except Christ and Him crucified. And that's a priority, isn't it? That's a priority that the Apostle Paul had. And he said, I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling. Paul had tremendous humility, I believe. He was this tremendous man of God, and he had this tremendous humility. And then he believed in the power of God. And I want to leave those words with you this morning as words to you from the Scripture that I feel like have been a part of my ministry. I came to you 15 years ago. 15 years ago, almost to the date, just a couple of days ago, was my first Sunday here. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. I'll tell you a little story that you probably don't know. Whenever we stayed in Mount Sterling after I resigned there for a couple of years because Adam was in school, and we didn't want to remove him from a great school that he had in Kentucky. Can you believe there's good schools in Kentucky, boys? But anyway, we didn't want to move him, so I found a secular job. And so after we knew that we'd be going back into the ministry, I let my name be out, let it be known that I was available. And we got this call from a church in Oregon. They really liked us. They never met us, but they talked to us a couple times on the phone. And Barbara and I talked about it a lot, and it just seemed like things were connecting with that church in Oregon. It was a church right at the Crater Lake National Park. We looked it up on the map, and it was really an incredible place. And they told us that they would call us 10 o'clock one night. I forget the night, but they says, we're going to call you back at 10 o'clock. Of course, that's 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock their time. And anyway, they said they're going to call you back at 10 o'clock. And we said, okay. And we'd already sort of made up in our mind that we felt good about this, and if they offered us a position, we would go to Oregon. But we already had known that Knoxville was looking at our resume, but we had never heard anything from them, so we just didn't know. So at 10 o'clock, we were going to get a call from Oregon, and Barbara and I probably thought, well, we'll just let them know that we'd be available. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. And this guy was on the other end, and his name was Gary Reed. And he said, are you kin to John Wallace? Yeah. John used to come in. Gary Reed called, and Gary said, Lee said, we're looking at your resume, and says, we have the pulpit committee right here, right now, and we'd like for you to come to Knoxville and maybe candidate and to try out. And Barbara and I says, Knoxville, Tennessee, they would understand my accent there. I wouldn't have to worry about it in Oregon and all. So anyway, to make things change, Gary called at 9 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock we told the church in Oregon that we didn't think that maybe it was God's will for us to be in Oregon, that we really felt leading to Knoxville. A couple days later after that, Barbara and I drove down here, unbeknownst to anybody here, and we looked at the church, drove in the parking lot, looked at the church, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. Barbara and I didn't have a lot of money at the time, and still don't have a lot of money, but we didn't have a lot of money at the time to stop at restaurants, so we made us a couple of bologna sandwiches, didn't we, Barbara, and a couple of drinks, and we stopped up here at the Knoxville Art Museum. I didn't know Knoxville very well, so I didn't know how to get out on the interstate. So we stopped at the Knoxville Art Museum, the parking lot, and ate our bologna sandwiches and talked about coming to Knoxville. And you so graciously allowed us to come. So that's how we got to Knoxville here. 1 hour's difference. If Gary had waited to call at 10:30 or something, we probably would have already committed to Oregon. But Gary called at 9 o'clock. So you can blame it on Gary. Just blame it on Gary. Whenever I felt my call to the ministry, when Barbara and I were when I was in the Air Force, and I felt my call to the ministry. The Air Force at the time, military was cutting back, and for some various things, so I was cut out of the Air Force. And also at that time, I felt my call to the ministry, and when we were in California, and as soon as I felt my call to the ministry, I knew that God was calling me into the ministry. I applied for seminary and went to seminary for 3 years. And while I was in seminary, a little church opened up that needed an interim pastor at Portland, Indiana. And I was able to be an interim pastor at that church for about 6 months. And it was a new experience for me to be a pastor of a congregation. And I was green as a gourd. And so I would go, Barbara and I would drive from Anderson to Portland, Indiana, and minister to that little congregation. And one time Barbara, we were going to have a special communion service that day, so Barbara bought a brand new dress. She bought a brand new dress just for that service, just for that service. So we had communion, and Barbara came up and helped, and it was just a wonderful service. And this lady that we just loved dearly up to, she came up to Barbara and says, "Oh, Barbara, you got a new dress today." And Barbara says, yeah, I bought a new dress. And Wilma says, "I know it's new because you still have the price tag hanging right here." You're going to ruin my ministry, Barbara, at the very beginning. You still had the price tag hanging right there. I went from Portland, Indiana, and I was there for a little bit. I realized that I couldn't pastor and be full-time student, so I went ahead and quit being an interim there and worked and just put full-time into seminary. And when I graduated from seminary, we went to Ansonia, Ohio. Brittany had just been born. Brittany was born in May, and we took the church in January. But what was, or in June. But what was interesting, they had called this pastor. This is how the Lord works. They had called this pastor, and I was looking through some minutes of that church the other day, and I thought it was amazing. They had called this pastor, and they really liked him, and they were having, on a particular Sunday, he was going to come and candidate, and they were having a special meal for him, and probably vote him in as pastor. Well, it came a real bad storm that night. If any of you know, in Ohio, you know about snowstorms up in Ohio. It came a terrible snowstorm. And that guy could not come, so they asked this little seminary guy if he could come over and just fill the pulpit. Well, I went over and filled the pulpit that day. And to make a long story short, they really liked Barbara, and they wanted me to come back. And because of that snowstorm, that fellow didn't get to preach, and they called me back 3 or 4 times, and then later on in April, they voted me in as pastor. And we had almost 18 years in Ansonia. And what was interesting, the first time we ever drove to the church, there had been a tremendous snowstorm. If you lived in Ohio at any length, you know there's a lot of snow up there. There had been a tremendous snowstorm. They cleared out the parking lot there, and they piled all of the snow into this huge pile there. And Bob and I had whipped into the parking lot because we didn't know that they had Sunday church first and then Sunday school later, so we didn't know it, but we were late. And but before I get to that story, I'll tell you this. A couple months before that, we had been in a terrible accident. And the Lord just really saved us from awful, awful accident. This 16-year-old boy rear-ended us as I was making a left, and he basically took off the left side of my car. And it was it was a little car, so it was in the oil crisis back in the middle 70s. So the insurance company decided to put the car back together. If I knew more now, I wouldn't have let them do it. But they decided to put the car back together. So I was driving that car that day. We went to Ansonia just to check it out. And I whipped around there to the end of the parking lot, and Barbara went ahead and got out of the car and was walking to the church. And why Barbara did this, I'll never know. I mean, Barbara was, about 9 months pregnant almost. I mean, she's just about ready to deliver Brittany. And instead of going around that snow pile, Barbara decided to go over the snow pile. So Barbara gets on the top of that snow pile, goes right into it, stuck right in that snow pile. In the meantime, I was getting out of the car, and I shut the door of my car, and I heard something go, kerplink, kerplink, and the door of that car fell right out into my hands. That insurance company really put it together good, didn't it? That door fell right out into my hands. And I says, Barbara, I said, the door fell off the car. And she said, I'm stuck in a snowdrift. Come and get me out of here. So I pushed the door, locked it some way, went over and pulled my pregnant wife out of the snowdrift, and we went into that church. And I thought to myself, they will never, ever call me or think anything about having us there. But anyway, they called me, and I pastored that church for almost 18 years and had a wonderful, wonderful pastorate there. Then after that pastorate, we moved to Mount Sterling, Kentucky, and we was there for a little while. And during about that time, Brittany was in college. And it all worked out. We were leaving Ansonia, and Brittany wanted to go to UK, and it all worked out. We went to Kentucky. Kentucky had a wonderful handicap program for Adam, and we went down there and was in Kentucky for a little while. While we were in Kentucky, Brittany got her degree from Eastern Kentucky, and I got a son-in-law while I was in Kentucky. And his name is Matt, my son-in-law, Matt. Yeah, I'll get rid of that. When we left Mount Sterling, I had worked for a couple years with a secular job, like I say, waiting for Adam to graduate from high school. They had a wonderful handicap program there, and Adam did wonderful in that high school. He got voted the most outstanding senior boy, and it was a good experience there for Adam to stay there. Then you called me, the Knoxville congregation called me here. And so we've been here now for 15 years, and we'll end up our pastoral ministry in the congregation. We came here 15 years ago, and all we could afford was bologna sandwiches. But you have been so good to us. You have been so good to us. I just want you to hear that from my lips. You have been so good to us, and we appreciate it. You've been a wonderful congregation. You've really helped Adam. You've taken care of Adam. You accepted my family. I haven't been a perfect pastor, but you have accepted us. We have loved you for 15 years. And we needed you when we came 15 years ago. I really, really needed you. And you responded by being a wonderful congregation. And I want you to know I appreciate and love the 15 years that I've been with you. Now, I know there's food out there, and you're probably saying, well, finish up so we can eat. A couple other things I want to say to you. I want to tell you a couple other things. I want to tell you what I felt like was my greatest joy as being a pastor. My greatest joy in being a pastor, number one, was to see people won to Jesus Christ. Over the years, I've seen people won to Christ and make a commitment of their life to Christ. And I've seen lives changed. I've seen drug addicts give up their drugs. A guy in my congregation was spending $300 a month on pornography. He got saved. He got away from his pornography. And one of the greatest joys of my life has just been able to see people come to Jesus Christ and see their lives changed and made different because of their commitment to Christ. Another joy that I've had is just serving you and serving the people. It's been a joy of my life just to laugh together, to play jokes on one another, to have our fellowship times together. Something you probably never know about me. I don't think any of my family knows about this, but a lot of times in my ministry, like you'd be here worshiping or something like that, and y'all would already be gone. The church would be empty, and I'd have to come back to my office to get a pencil or a book or something, and I'd be by myself in the sanctuary. And whenever you leave this sanctuary, there is a warmth here, because I guess of all of our body heat. But there's a warmth here, and there's a smell of mixed perfume here. And it's a good feeling to feel you. And you have been so wonderful to us, and we've had an opportunity just to minister to you. We've laughed together. I've buried a lot of your mothers. I've buried your fathers. I've buried some of your children. And even though we've stood by gravesides before, and I've been with you when you've shut the casket, and you've cried, and I've been there and I've held you close, it's been good to have the joy. And it's also been good to feel the love that we've had for one another. It's my greatest joy. It's just been to serve you and to love you, and to know that you have loved us in return. My greatest joy. I've had struggles, not only here but other churches. I've had struggles. One of my biggest struggles has always been, and I think any pastor can, Jim and Norm and Jerry and Brother Clark, any other pastor here, Bill, probably has related. One of my biggest struggles has always been trying to meet the expectations of everybody. Everybody has expectations of a pastor, don't they? And sometimes you don't meet all those expectations. And it's rough, it's sad to know that you may be expecting something and not able to meet that expectation. A lot of times people may leave the congregation because their expectations weren't met. And when people have done that, they've always just sort of taken a part of my heart with them. And that was one of my biggest struggles, was just not being able to meet the expectations of everybody. Let me tell you the funniest moment I ever had in my ministry, okay? Tell you my funniest moment. Now, it's a little crass. This is the funniest moment I had in ministry. It's a little crass. It may be a little off-colored. But what are you going to do, fire me? I was visiting one time in the hospital. This lady was Echo, was her name. You think I should tell a story, Barbara? Yeah, her name was Echo, and I went into the hospital room, and hospital rooms you come in the door. There's a bed there. There was an elderly lady in the bed, and Echo was in the next bed over here by the window. And I went in. I said something to the little lady in the bed there, and I go talking to Echo, and I just pull a chair up here to talk to Echo in the hospital and see how she's doing. Well, while I was talking to Echo, the lady in the first bed rang the nurse, and she said, "The nurse, I have to use the bathroom." And the nurse said, "Okay." So the nurse comes in. You've all been in hospital rooms. The nurse came in and pulls the curtain to separate us from the lady, and then the nurse comes and sets the pot. I told you this was going to be crass. She sets the pot down right here, but unbeknownst to the nurse, she set the pot right down behind me. And there was a curtain between me and the lady. So this dear little lady came and sat down on the pot, and she thought my back was a part of the pot. So she leaned up against my back and did her use the bathroom. Bless her heart, she was having a hard time. And she kept going, and she kept going. And I thought, what do I do? If I jump up, she's going to fall right on the floor. So she kept going, and finally she finished. And she got up, and I jumped up too, as quick as I could. I'll never forget that bony little back against my back. But that time, that was probably my funniest time in a minute. I'll never forget that as long as I live. Another time, we had my church in Ansonia. There was a lot of jokers in my church in Ansonia, as they are here. And it was a Sunday night, and I was getting ready to preach. And as you notice, I drink water. Any preacher likes water. And there was a water cup right there where I drank my water. So I was sitting down there, the service was going on, and pretty soon I began to hear a little funny noise and all. And I looked down, and somebody had put a goldfish in my water. So I just reached down, and just took a big swat. No, I didn't. But I've had all kinds of things like that pulled on me, and a lot of fun. A lot of fun. One of the things I've had in my ministry, as much as anything, has been just a lot of fun. I've tried to have fun. A lot of serious moments, but I've tried to have fun a lot of times with the people and all. It's always been good. I'll leave you with this. One thing I have found out, and I really want you to know this, and I'll leave it with you. God has always been with us. God's always been there. We've had some rough times. Been some rough times in the ministry. I've been called some names. I've had people very, very angry at me at times. We've had some difficulties meeting financial obligations because some of the churches didn't pay that well. And there were some very difficult times. When Adam was born, we were all excited about having this pretty baby. If you can believe this, is a pretty little baby boy. I don't know what happened, but. And the doctor came to us a little bit later, and he said, I just have a sixth sense that something's not right with Adam. And we're going to put him in intensive care. So he put him in intensive care, and the next day they sent him to Barney's Hospital in Dayton. So there's been these really rough times in our ministry. But I can stand here and say this, that God's always been with us. God's never left us, and He's always been with us. And I can say this for you, God will always be with you. No matter what you go through, no matter what difficulties you have, you may not be in a hospital and somebody use your back as a pot. You might not have those things. There may be some difficult things in your life. But God will always be with you. He'll never leave you, and He'll never forsake you. I want to close with this one scripture that I think is a wonderful scripture. One of my favorites, probably one of my favorites in the Bible. Joshua's getting ready to go into the promised land. You know the story. Moses is dead. Joshua is now the captain of the people of Israel. He's getting ready to go into the promised land. God gives him these words. God says to Joshua, He says, "Be strong and of a good courage. Do not be afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whereversoever thou goest." And that's what I'll leave with you today. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. No matter what God has for you as a congregation or for us, God is always with us, and God will always be there. You've been a wonderful congregation, and I love every one of you. I'm not necessarily retiring. I'm sort of refreshing myself and all. And I think you probably have to take my tongue and beat it to death before it to stop. I don't know. Let's sing a closing hymn. You want to sing that song then? Let's sing that now, okay? Let's go. What page? 320? Let's stand and sing this hymn 320 together. Then I hope all of y'all stay to eat.